Hello, I'm Olympia McEwan, and for the 7-Woman podcast, I'll be interviewing Professor Skene of Surrey University, who worked closely with Professor Josephine Arendt. Hi Debra, could you please introduce yourself, your area of expertise, and your relationship to the professor?
Hello everyone, I'm Debra Skene. I'm a professor. My main area of research is studying biological rhythms and biological clocks. That's clocks within your own body. And we officially call that chronobiology. So we have a group at Surrey where we study the subject. And I first met Joe. I was lucky enough to be employed by Joe in 1984. So that's close on 40 years, where I was her first postdoctoral researcher. And since then, I moved and I stayed at Surrey and sort of moved up the ranks to finally being a professor for the last sort of 20 years.
Thank you. So why was Jo known as the Queen of Melatonin?
Melatonin was her passion. It's a hormone and it's made naturally in the body every night. And the reason why she was the sort of queen of melatonin, I remember the BBC arriving in the lab, and the head of the lab came in and said, "Let me introduce you to the queen of melatonin, Professor Josephine Arendt." Essentially because she pioneered all the work and everything that we know about melatonin, particularly in humans, in people. And the two parts of that were she was the first person to give us a very accurate and reliable way of measuring the hormone. And when you can measure something, then it means you can start doing experiments about what might the function be, because we could measure it in different conditions, in different people at different times. So it was the measurement. And then the other side of the coin was that you actually could package melatonin, as a tablet, as a drug, and you could take melatonin. And she investigated the sort of properties, what effect that compound, what melatonin did for us when we took it, for example, in jet lag and shift work and things like that.
So yeah, indeed the Queen of Melatonin.
Yeah.
So in the past 4 decades, how has our area of research impacted our everyday lives? What do we understand about our body clocks and the effects of melatonin and light thanks to Jo?
Yes, well, Jo was the real pioneer. I know we use that word a lot, maybe we overuse it, but she really was the first person to give melatonin to people and to see whether that helped when you traveled across time zones. And the first study was hers, where people took melatonin when they flew from San Francisco back to London. And it was amazing compared to the placebo sugar version of the drug, that melatonin really significantly reduced jet lag symptoms. And so that has amazing translational application. Once we started realizing that it could shift the timing of the clock, then you can think also that it can be used in people who have abnormal sleep timing. For example, people who have very delayed sleep. So these are people that can't go to bed before 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and wake up at about lunchtime. And melatonin again was shown to be able to sort of pull the late type back to normal. So you could advance the clock with melatonin, and it's been used in that condition as well.
And so Jo was also deeply involved in the research programs with the British Antarctic Survey Base in Antarctica. How influential was this research program and what was its outcome?
Yeah, well, this was a sort of thinking of a condition where you've got a laboratory in a place where the seasons are so different. So one of our outstanding questions in the field is whether humans, people, whether we have seasonality. We know animals have seasonality, And the melatonin and the pineal gland are deeply involved in this. And so she needed an environment where you could study humans living and working in a place where you got extreme winters and extreme summers. And I think somewhere, because she had this love of travel as well, and very passionate, she really wanted to try and combine research in that area with being able to finally go there. So the British Antarctic Survey allowed her to go, and she went down on a ship with the crew and ended up overwintering in the Antarctic.
It's amazing, isn't it? What a story.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I should say that every year, for many years, a doctor, they always have a doctor on the base. And so she would involve the doctors who were on that base for that year on a project. So she had them, giving people lights and taking blood samples and urine samples. And then they would come back with these samples and then come and work in our lab for a while. So, it's really some novel research findings were found out there.
Also, am I right in saying that she was the first woman to set foot in the British Antarctic base for this research program?
I'm not sure, because fortunately quite a while ago they allowed females, and we had some female doctors going out there, but maybe she was the first researcher rather than going as a medical person.
Yeah, so another first for Jo.
Oh, yes.
And one of her proudest achievements was her work with the blind community. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, this was a fabulous story, because actually a blind man came to see Jo, and he was totally blind. Now, when you're totally blind, you're getting no information via your eyes about whether it's light or dark. So your whole body and your body clocks don't have this sort of resetting thing that light does for us every day. And so blind people, totally blind people, their body clocks run at their own natural periodicity. And he arrived in the lab and said, I'm totally blind. I've worked out when I have periods of good sleep and then when I have periods of bad sleep. And I've worked out that my natural period of my clock is about 24 and a half hours. So every day his clock delays by 30 minutes, half an hour. So day one, you're half an hour out, day two, you're an hour out, and you can multiply that up. So after 2 weeks, you're 7 hours out of phase, meaning that there you are, and you're trying to work during the day in the afternoon, and your body is telling you it's midnight, you're supposed to go to sleep. And so she pioneered for the first time giving melatonin as a drug to these blind people. And we showed in lots of studies that Jo and I did, along with our colleague Steve Lockley, the three of us really showed that melatonin is the drug of choice. So blind people can't use light, like you could use light or I could use light. But if you're blind, melatonin is the only drug currently that can reset your clock and sort of keep you able to live on this sort of 24-hour day that we all live on.
I think that really does justify her title, the Queen of Melatonin, doesn't it? And congratulations to you and all the team that have pioneered these incredible research programs. So as you know, the main focus of my 7-woman exhibition is to shine a light on the lives and stories of notable women and to redress the imbalance of portraits of women in our public collections and public spaces. Did you and Jo ever have conversations around being a woman in the scientific community? Did being a woman help or hinder you in any way? And are we celebrating the achievements of notable women enough in the world of science?
Well, let me congratulate you on trying to raise the profile of women, because of course in the era that Jo was a young researcher, this was a very difficult time. In our field, I can think of 3 women of Jo's age who, were pioneers and who were mentors and heroes for me. And, we would go to conferences and there might be, one woman speaker all day. But now when we go to these conferences, we've got so many young women scientists in the audience. They ask questions, they chair the symposia, they are speakers almost 50-50 with the men. I mean, I think one day there'll be more women in science than men. So, but in her early days, it was a real struggle. And I think, she saw men more acknowledged by some of the higher institutions in the country, like the Royal Society, for example, that didn't have her CV, that didn't have her pioneering papers and research that we've talked about. So, but I think she was happy that she could see things changing, and I'm very happy that, I was her. She was my mentor and a protege. I was her protege, really, and she certainly helped me in my career and lots of other people with advice and writing promotion letters. So she really, there would be a lot of people here today who could join me in thanking her for what she has done for women in science in our field.
Yeah, that is a massive achievement. And so finally, I'd like to talk about the professor's portrait. What was your reaction to my portrait when you first saw it, and how did you interpret it?
Well, I looked at it and I thought, you've really captured Jo. There's something, I can see the reference to melatonin and that, but it's more in her face and the way she's sitting and looking. It's a very typical pose that she had. So the whole entity of Jo, I really thought, I feel she's there. And it's the sort of openness that she had. She had a very inquiring mind and she was very kind to people. So she would always, however famous she was, and of course she was famous, she always would ask the person she was talking to, and where do you come from and what is your research area? And, so she was very attentive, and she really wanted to know about other people. And I think you've captured a sort of openness and the inquiring mind that she had.
Well, thank you very much. That's high praise indeed. And thank you, Deborah, so much for your time. I really, really do appreciate it. And maybe one day we'll meet in person. But in the meantime, thank you. It was lovely to meet you virtually.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much, Olympia.
Thank you.